Hey, Janet, Patrick.
Evening, everybody.
Good evening, Patrick.
Evening.
I wonder why they're.
Hi, everyone.
Xavier.
Xavier, how are you today, sir?
Not too bad. How are you doing, Pete?
Good, doing good.
Before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody on council know, I'm sure this is like number one on your list. I'm getting the budget document with those few corrections finalized. So probably within the next couple of days, I'll have it out to you. We'll get it posted on the website. And then everybody can read through it again, because it's so exciting. Now, Zavi might have like 28 more questions for me after that, but I guess I ought to watch myself.
Maybe like 25, Patrick. Don't be exaggerating.
I always thought that it was always better if Patrick read the whole thing and reported.
Thanks, Pete.
Like an audio book version.
Exactly.
You know, there are podcasts to put people to sleep. I think that one would be right up there.
Motion to approve. Oh, are we not? Is that not
Oh, on favor, aye.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, man.
Are we? Let's take a look here. Feeling like we have a full house. Okay. All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to the first meeting of the Council of the City of Lancaster in the year 2021. Hope everybody had or is having a lovely holiday season whenever it started. If you're, for example, Catholic like me, Christmas is still trucking along. But whatever you celebrate around this time of year, I hope it was restful and joyful for you under the conditions. Okay, great. Well, welcome back, 2021. It's a big year. And we'll start it as we always do. Mr. Harris, would you please call the roll of members?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo,
Here.
Ms. Baker,
Here.
Ms. Craig,
Here.
Ms. Diaz,
Here.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Here.
Mr. Soto,
Here.
and President Smith Waddell.
Here. Okay. Now we have the approval of the December 1st and 1st, what was that? December 1st and 5th committee meeting minutes. Is that right, Mr. Harris?
Yes, it is.
All right, I'll hear such a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Comments from council.
I would just like to thank Mr. Harris for painstakingly taking the minutes for both of those meetings. Very helpful in preparing my reports to full council, and just amazing the level of detail that you get for us for two very long meetings. So thank you.
Okay, any other council comments? Hearing none, Mr. Harris?
Mr. Arroyo,
Aye.
Ms. Baker,
Aye.
Ms. Craig,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
Mr. Soto,
Aye.
and President Smith Waddell.
Aye. Okay, we have minutes. All right, that brings us to our first committee, which is Personnel Committee. Counselor Diaz, take it away.
Yes, Mr. President. Personnel Committee. Right now, we are going to make a motion for the nomination of Lloyd Henry for the appointment of the Civil Service. I don't know, but I think I saw Mr. Henry on one of the participant. Would Mr. Henry like to address City Council at this time?
He was there, but I'm not seeing him anymore, so he must have logged out.
Okay.
If I see him come back in, I will let you. Oh, there he is. Let me add him in.
Turn on your video. Right there.
I'm finally here. I had to go back out and come back in.
I will step out of the.
Would you like to go ahead and address City Council and let us know your intention and your background to just give us an insight of who you are and why you want to be part of it?
I've been Lloyd Henry. I've been living at Whittier Lane for 43 years now. Worked in the fire department for 35 years, came up through the ranks, retired as deputy chief. I just want to make sure that we have a good and equitable take on the Civil Service Board for everybody all around.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. Does anyone in the Personnel Committee have any questions for Mr. Henry?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank him for his, excuse me, for his work in the past and in the coming future on the Civil Service Board. And we're glad to have your knowledge and your experience, sir.
Thank you. I'm on the appeals board also,
Oh, there you go.
since I retired.
Well, thank you for all your service.
Anytime.
And look forward to working with you in the future.
I am too. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council?
Counselor Diaz.
Yes.
Mr. Henry, thank you so much for being here this evening. And I echo Counselor Soto's sentiments. We really appreciate your service to the city as a member of the fire department and your willingness to serve on the Civil Service Board. I think it's really important that we have someone who had been through the process to be on the board. So that is certainly great. And just as a point of clarification, is Mr. Henry being appointed to fill a vacancy? Is that correct? Or is this?
No,
Is it at the
it's an appointment.
term?
It's not a reappointment. It's an appointment.
Yes.
Right.
And it's filling a vacancy according to Mr. Harris.
Yes, the vacancy.
That's right. I just wanted to double check that. Thank you so much.
No questions for me, Ms. Counselor Diaz, but thank you so much for your service, Mr. Henry.
I've lived in Lancaster for 40 some years now, so I want to give back and
We appreciate it.
still part of the process.
If there's any other questions from the public, motions on the table.
Second.
Okay, then we will, if all approve, we can move this then to January the 12th for our next city council meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
The next ones we have are reappointments. I have Douglas Byer. He is being reappointed to the Historical Architectural Review Board. Christina Leslie for reappointment of the Shade Tree Commission. Rob O'Shank for reappointment to the Shade Tree Commission. Dean Lee Evans, reappointment to the Traffic Commission. And the next one is Constantine Mandros for reappointment to the Traffic Commissions.
Motion to move all of these appointments forward at the January 12th meeting.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's any questions, by the way? Okay, that's all I have for the Personnel Committees. President Waddell.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. We are going to move right along then to the Community Planning Committee. Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Council President. The first item on our agenda is review of the Historical Architectural Review Board recommendation for denial for 130 East Vine Street. And I'm hoping there's somebody here to address it, possibly Mr. Lefevre.
We have Suzanne Stallings in the waiting room.
Okay, we'll go with Suzanne.
Thank you, Counselor. We should also have from the HARB, Donald Main, who is the architect and chairman, and then Mimi Shapiro, and then the homeowner and her architect should also be on the line.
Thank you. There's Mr. Main.
What is the name of the homeowner?
You're making me pronounce the Greek name. It's Ursula is her first name. We always just call her Ursula.
And Amber, if Douglas Smith is on the call, if you could bring him on too, that'd be helpful. Just in case we need him.
I think he's City of Lancaster, so that's who I added.
Yes.
Perfect.
Hey, there's Ursula.
Yes. There we go. Okay.
The architect is Susan Matos.
There she is, and there's Ms. Shapiro too.
Yeah, I had to come back in for some reason. I was there.
Okay. Okay, Suzanne, do you want to start us off?
Sure, if you would. In November, Council looked at a similar proposal, also requesting replacement of cedar roof shingles with asphalt shingles, also on East Vine Street, although a block to the west. In that case, it was a small brick house that was sandwiched in between two much taller buildings. In this case, it is a freestanding stone building that was converted from a stable. Much more of the roof is visible, including from the rear along Old Trinity Place, which is also subject to review. And it's also compared to the little brick house in November. It's just stylistically and the age is very different from a row house. The HARB concluded the same, that the retention of cedar shingles was important to retain the architectural and stylistic character of the building.
Thank you. Can I hear from Mr. Main?
Yes, I think just to add a little bit on to what Suzanne shared, all of the members of the HARB in reviewing this application acknowledged that the roofing material, the cedar shingles on this building is a character defining feature for the structure. And as we have to do in reviewing the Secretary of the Interior standards, found that 4 standards, which are included in the packet that Suzanne distributed, are come to play here in terms of review standards for us to review the application with and make recommendation to council. Standard number 2, which states the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. Standard number 5, that states distinctive features, finishes, construction techniques, or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. standard number 6, which states deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced, and where the severity of the deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old feature in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities and material where possible. And number 9, which states that exterior alterations shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. So again, in our review, because the roof is such a prevalent part of the building and the material character defining feature of that type of structure, we could not recommend changing that material to asphalt shingles.
Thank you, Mr. Main. If there's anybody is there anybody on the panel now that would like to add relevant information to what we were just given before we move on and speak with Mrs. Agropopoulos? How'd I do?
Not bad.
Okay. Okay. No?
Well, it's Argyropoulos. Oh, okay.
Argyropoulos.
Right.
Thank you. The one, how long have you lived at this property?
10 years. In about 3 weeks, it'll be 10 years.
And I'm going to ask if there's any other questions from the committee.
If I may, Councillor Craig?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Hi, just a couple questions. One, can you explain kind of like the reasoning behind the going with the alternative that's recommended by the historical board? I'm sorry, this is for Ursula.
For me? Oh, actually, if I may turn that over to my architect, Susan Matus, is that all right?
Yes.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi there.
So the question, can I have the question repeated, please?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my question is just, what is the reasoning behind the recommendation of the alternative to the cedar roof?
So we're here based on the premise that the City Council had granted permission for slate roofs to be changed to asphalt shingles without any review through the historic architectural review board. And that was premised on the notion that of the cost. And what I'm bringing to you is that the cost of a cedar roof is approximately 8% less than a slate roof. So it's a very significant cost for any homeowner to take on, but particularly on a home that is so large. The roof is very large on this.
Thank you. And I guess my question maybe for Director Delfs or Ms. Stallings is, I remember last time when we were talking through this that something was brought up around applying for economic hardship, or that could be, there's a process to go through that. Am I correct in recalling that, or?
Yes, the claim of unreasonable economic hardship goes to City Council based on the full City Council based on a HARB's recommendation of denial or a HARB's recommendation that a specific material be used. It's spelled out in the ordinance, and the applicant has to provide 7 documentation, including the purchase price, assessed value, 2 cost estimates for the material that the HARB is requesting versus 2 cost estimates for the alternative. And there's also significant that the cost alone is not the factor, that the applicant has to prove that based on what the HARB is recommending, that they are unable to obtain a reasonable return or reasonable beneficial use from the property. So it's a high standard.
Those are all the questions I had, Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Are there any other questions from the committee?
I have a question, Councilor Craig. I guess my question is for Director Delves. When this situation came up last time, we did decide to move forward because of cost effectiveness, but also given what Mrs. Stallings just shared with us, what is your recommendation for us as a council body to be able to kind of make it public and encourage people to go through the process for economic hardships? Because this is kind of what I was anticipating last time, was that we would be running into the similar situation. So how do we go about navigating this?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, because when we consider these types of situations, each property does have individual circumstances, but as best we can, I think we want to be consistent across these various decisions. As Suzanne mentioned, the standard for proving economic hardship for both the HARB and the Historical Commission is fairly high. And so during the last decision that was rendered by the council, I think the focus was really on the quotes for the cost of the roof. Now, I would argue that the ordinance does go a lot further than that, and that the documentation standard is higher. So I think this is why we have these conversations at committee, actually, before they go before council for a vote, because I think it's worth discussing how we uphold these across various decisions. And if the economic hardship bar is correct, then based on the judgment of council, I think that we should be applying it consistently. If you think that economic hardship bar is set too high, then I think it's a discussion amongst council and with the administration about whether there should be any amendments to the ordinance.
So amending the ordinance, like lowering the bar for economic hardship, is within our ability to kind of collaborate on and work on?
It is. It's legislation, so it is. There is the capability to modify if you feel it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When people are denied at the moment for recommendations, are they encouraged or kind of guided through how to apply for the economic hardship aspect of things?
Yes, I mean, I do think that Suzanne, as our historic preservation specialist, does a good job in trying to provide all the information to the applicants that is necessary. Douglas and I actually have been having a lot of good conversations about this lately, about how to tackle some of these tricky projects going ahead, whether it's a window or a roof, or in some cases it's a larger project where we're talking about a demolition or something of perhaps greater stature. One of the things that we've talked about amongst the two of us, and I don't want to get too ahead of the mayor or the administration, but one of the things that we've talked about is within the current ordinance, it does provide that the HARB and the Historical Commission can consider economic evidence. And I would make the argument that I think it would be of some value that the historical bodies are looking at these projects holistically. And so often the economic hardship decision has been left to council. I do think it might be worthwhile to have some wrestling with that notion at the historic board level before it goes to council. That's one thing that Douglas and I have talked about, but ultimately this is a process decision.
Great. Thank you so much.
And possibly an ordinance decision too, if you want to go down that track.
Thank you. That's it for me, Councilor Craig, in regards to questions.
Thank you so much.
Councilor Craig, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
In this case, were all of the requirements for economic hardship submitted in terms of the two quotes for the different types of roofing materials?
No.
No. Okay. And so I think that that's part of, to your point, Councilor Garcia Molina, that if am I understanding this correctly, that this conversation and why this is coming to City Council and the presentation that is being made by property owner and is on the basis of economic hardship and cost, essentially? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then I think that if that's going to be the case in the future, my recommendation would be that that the requirements that are delineated that Suzanne has outlined would need to be met before coming to council, such that that information could be availed to councilors in advance of making a decision. That's my recommendation to your question, Councilor Garcia Molina.
I appreciate it, Mayor.
Councilor Craig, may I please I have some questions I'd like to ask.
Go ahead, Councilor Soto.
Well, first, I'm not quite sure who'll be able to answer this, but I'm going to address it to Susan. Is this property part of Old Town Lancaster?
Yes.
And do they not fall under certain regulations themselves?
Yes.
And this was converted into a home how long ago? And has the roof that's there now been has it always been cedar shingles, or has it another roof been on this property prior to this request being made?
If I could answer that, I have a photo where at one point this was a two-family house, and one side was wood, and I believe the other side was asphalt.
But when the property was purchased, it was purchased with cedar shingles, correct?
Yes.
When that's correct.
And does anybody know how long those shingles were on that property prior to, well, before the last 10 years?
Yes, I can answer that. It was, this roof was put on in 2002.
And prior to that, was it shingles, or, like you said, asphalt and shingles?
No, the roof, I believe, was put on when the house was redone back either in the late 70s or early 80s. I don't know the exact date, but it was somewhere in that period.
So would it be fair if I say that in the last 50 years it has had wood shingles on top?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Susan, as part of Old Hickory, don't they have specific regulations for that whole section of the city, other and above and beyond the Historical Review Board?
No, not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. But it is
There's
within
no
Old Town.
homeowners. There's no homeowners association.
No, I am aware of that, but I'm talking about Historical Review. Does this fall separately than the rest of the city?
No.
But changing from the cedar shingles to asphalt shingles will take away from the appearance of that whole neighborhood, would it not?
Yeah.
That is the unfortunate reality of it, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. You've answered all my questions.
Councilor Craig, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Diaz.
How long does that particular roof with the cedar shingles last? Like, what is the length of time that it normally, is it 30 years? Is it 20 years?
So there are installers who will tell you you can have a 50-year warranty. However, the Cedar Shingle and Shake Bureau does not stand by that. They recommend the assumption on the thicker wood shingles, time frame of 30 to possibly 35 years.
And is there,
May I add that there's also maintenance that can be done as
Yeah.
part of owning a cedar shingle roof. And if that maintenance is done where you keep the growth off of the roof, that you can extend the life of that roof, and you can, have a significant lifespan. So it's like any other material. If it's cared for properly, you can have, a long life.
thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Yes, ma'am.
This is for anyone who can sort of succinctly address this. There's some notes from the HARB meeting that talk about some issues below the roof and on the substrate. Can someone speak a little bit about what that means for this roof, and if it gives any bearing to the cost of this replacement because of the substrate and the condition that it's in? Maybe I'm not reading that correctly, but.
No, I understand you. The existing substrate is a mixture of wood and plywood that has been cobbled together over the years. We have plaster ceilings under the half story of the upper portion of this house. The existing rafters look to be possibly some are original. They're hand-hewn logs, basically. I believe in the late 70s, early 80s renovation that they sistered on 2x6s to that to give some strength to this roof. So the issue with doing anything on this roof is that we will probably experience a cracked plaster and damage to the interior. So that adds to what we have to take into account. The overall cost of the project, if we do the cedar roof, is just below $98,000. And that includes, there are unusual little skylights worked into this roof that would have to be replaced and would have to be reworked through that process. There's obviously gutter work and dormer work and all kinds of things that go into actually refurbishing this roof.
And I saw a couple of quotes in our notes. How many estimates were obtained so far?
So I've gotten 3 estimates for each asphalt, cedar, and slate.
Perfect. Thank you.
And what was the, I really, right off the top of my head, the estimate for asphalt?
Just the shingles or the entirety of the?
Yes.
Let me just pull that up for you.
So the 98,000 what for cedar was for the entire project?
Yes.
Am I correct? And
yes.
Then the entire project for asphalt
is just over 55,000.
And the one for slate?
The slate is at about 102,000.
Thank you. Is there any other relevant information that anyone would like to add? No? Well, I think what I would like to do is maybe table this until meeting after next, which would be the 20, council meeting on the 20 something.
Will this go to the next committee meeting, Councilor Craig?
Hold on one second.
That would be,
February 1st is the,
February 1st, yes, okay. So if we would table this until the next committee meeting, February 1st, pending further conversation, so that I think we can all get a better and clearer understanding of what we're dealing with here and get a handle on some of the estimates, and also like comb through some more of the documentation and have conversation. And that's what I'm going to motion to do.
second.
Councilor Craig, if I would like to add to the motion, and Mr. Harris, I don't know if this is the correct procedure, but that if it comes to February's first committee meeting, could we ask that if this truly is for economic hardship, that that process get followed? Or would that be an entirely new motion?
It would be an entirely new motion. The motion on the table now is to table.
Okay.
And I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, Councilor Craig, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Harris, could Councilor Arroyo amend the motion on the table, or would Councilor Craig's motion have to be voted down and an entirely new motion be raised?
I believe you could amend it with a second.
I think to that, because what we are talking about here is an appeal on the basis of economic hardship, and the ordinance already includes what standards we ask for at that point. So yeah, Councilor Arroyo, I think if you could craft an amendment to sort of phrase that out, my assumption is that you would find a second amongst your assembled colleagues.
Gotcha. And that's in addition to a second, correct?
So the motion has been, it's been, there's been a motion made, it's been seconded. You would now be moving to amend the motion on the table.
Got it. So I will amend Councilor Craig's motion to include that that if this is due to economic hardship, that the process that the ordinance allows be followed for the next committee meeting.
I will second.
Okay.
Tried my best there.
Okay, so I think we're now in a position, and forgive me, Councilor Craig, this is your part of the story. We're now in a position where comments and ultimately the vote right now are on the amendment, not on the motion itself. So we are in amendment territory right now.
Motion to amend.
So what are we doing? Seconding the amendment? I already seconded it.
You've already seconded it.
Now you have to bring it up with the amendment.
So now you have to call for a vote on the amendment, Councilor Craig, and then you can call for a vote on the original motion.
Got it. Okay. So all those in favor on the amendment Councilor Arroyo put forth?
Second.
Aye. Thank you. And then all those in favor of tabling till February 1st for further conversation.
As amended.
As amended.
Aye.
Second.
There you go. We will take this up at a later date and hopefully have this resolved in some form or fashion on February 1st, pending conversation with those that are pertinent to this. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I don't know how to go about getting the forms for the paperwork that you'll be needing for February 1st. Is that something that I should go to Suzanne Stallings for? Or
Yeah, Ursula, I will follow up with you and Susan and give you the detailed list of what you need to provide and when.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just so I understand, we're going to be receiving all the documentation as far as quotes for both shingles and cedar, along with the information for the hardship, correct? All that is coming to us prior to the February 1st meeting, just so I understand.
That's correct, Councilor Soto, and that follows on the mayor's recommendation earlier. And just to be crystal clear, I wanted to ask Suzanne again here that Suzanne, up until this point, you did not have all of the documentation that you needed for those 7 items that you articulated earlier.
That's correct. We had the quotes, but we didn't have things like the date of purchase and the purchase price and the current assessed values and those kind of economic issues.
Right. Okay, very good.
And just so council's aware, the way the ordinance reads is that the city clerk's required to get that information 14 days prior to when you would be considering. So you're in about, a week and a half or so.
Is that enough time for the parties?
No.
I'm going to say no.
What was the question?
If a week and a half is a time for the architect and the house, the homeowner to get those materials to us to follow the 14-day rule that Patrick just explained to us. So how much time would you all need? Because if by February 1st, if we don't have the materials, I don't want to keep having to push this along.
Kind of time would be involved in doing the paperwork that that we've been discussing. So it's hard for me to know what kind of time is necessary for that.
Agreed. We don't know what the paperwork is at this point, so it is very hard to make
Well,
that
I mean,
assessment.
Susan and Ursula, you already had, for the HARPS purposes, you already pulled 3 estimates, and the ordinance is only asking for 2 comparative estimates. You just have to break it down about what was just the shingle work, what was the related roof work for the, I mean, slate didn't even come into it. It would really just be the cedar and the asphalt. It's not hard to find. I mean, just look up the county website, what the appraised value is, and you know what the purchase price was.
Right.
So it's just a little background history.
Mm-hmm. Right. No,
Not the appraised value, the assessed value.
The only thing that I don't know is the paperwork for the hardship. I wasn't aware of that. So.
Yeah, I'll be sending that to you, and really it's just, I mean, I'll help you package it, but it's really just pulling together the financials on the value of the property and then the estimates.
Okay, so then Susan, do you have any concerns about the time?
Yes, considering I have other things on the table for me to get done before then, yes, I do have some concerns about it.
As a point of clarification, if I may, council consideration of this would be at the first regular meeting in February. So 14 days prior to that would be the 26th of January.
So, Ms. Stallings, the timing of getting the documents in and in place is adequate.
I can't speak for the applicant, but it sounds like to me she already has most of it ready, and the other purchase price information is easy to pull together. But I don't know that. She might want to relook at the estimates.
Councilor Craig, if I may.
Go ahead, Councilor Roy.
Mr. Harris, if the paperwork could we move forward with the motion that we just seconded? And if the resident isn't able to provide the necessary documents, can she call you to remove the item from the agenda, and then we could revisit it at a next committee meeting?
Absolutely, you can call me or certainly go through Ms. Stallings, who is handling this.
Right. That would probably be my recommendation, is that if we aren't able to meet that deadline, that call Mr. Harris at the city office to remove it from the agenda, and then we can revisit it at the next committee meeting.
That seems reasonable to me.
Solution.
I would like an opportunity to get some updated pricing on particularly the wood roofs, because our building costs, particularly the material costs, have jumped significantly. And the quotes that I have are from August, September.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. That was very helpful. I'm going to call for a vote on the we have two motions on the table. Am I correct? You're muted.
Yeah, they've actually already been approved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is resolution number 3, approving an amendment to the sewer control plan. I'm going to assume that that's Douglas.
That's me. Good evening, councilors. Glad to see you all and Happy New Year to you. So once again, I'm here to just briefly walk you through the perfunctory vote for sewer control plan for this project. This is regarding 215 North Queen Street. This is the location where a building had previously collapsed, which is now a vacant parcel next door to the now built Red Rose Transit garage. That parcel, which has been occasionally used by the city police for K9 unit training, is slated for development for 51 new one-bedroom units by the Eberly Myers group. And this project has already received zoning and historical commission approval. They are preparing for land development submission within the coming weeks. And so they've submitted this sewer planning module to you for approval in advance of that, since DEP can take months these days to turn these around. This has already been completed and filled out by our sewer and water utility engineers, and we are recommending it for approval.
Thank you, Douglas. I have just one question. Now, the sewer control plan and then the sewer module plan, what's the difference between the two?
So the city is required to have a sewer control plan for the entire city. So when you have a land development project like this that comes through and creates new flows into the city's sewer system, there has to be an amendment to that control plan. So that sewer planning module is really the utility planning that is submitted to DEP for review, and you all are acting on it as an official amendment to our control plan.
So one is for existing, like a building that already exists, and the other is for new land development.
I suppose you could see it that way. So if a building is reused, though, say a vacant building that has been vacant for a long time suddenly is filled with 100 residential units, the building wouldn't have to change. There wouldn't have to be new construction, but the intensity of use changes. So really, these modules are required anytime we reach the DEP's threshold of 800 gallons of sewage per day increase. So this at this location, we have a vacant parcel, and the new building is creating far greater sewer flows than were there even at the previous building. We do have capacity for this increase, according to our utility engineers, but we need to officially amend our control plan to show that we're in support and that we have the facilities to accommodate these increased flows. And then DEP basically double checks that and has their own review process. So once you all sign off on this, if you choose to sign off on the resolution, that resolution will be packaged in a sewer planning module and sent to DEP for final approval.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? From the public? We'll give it a second or two.
One of these days, maybe someone will comment on one of these.
Great. Okay, hearing none, I motion that we move this to full council on the 12th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Aye. The next item on the agenda is amending the emergency solution plan to provide shelter funding. Looking for a representative. Hi, Chris.
Hello, I think we should have Susanna Thorson on the line. She was planning to do a short presentation for you about an amendment to our emergency solutions grant funding. Yep, there she is.
Hi, good evening, councilors. Oh. Okay, sorry, my volume went down there for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
So I put together a very brief presentation. If it's okay, I'll share my screen.
Please do.
I'm only going to go through the first three slides here, so don't be afraid. The rest are just in case you have questions. So you may remember that back last year, we received emergency solutions grant dollars specifically to address COVID. These dollars are called ESG CV dollars for short. In the first round, we received $503,000, and we went through a similar process where we came before you and requested to put those dollars into certain buckets in order to spend those dollars. We received 2 other rounds from the federal government with additional dollars. The second round, we didn't get any additional ESG CV dollars, but in the third round, we did get this amount right here, $809,254. You might remember this slide. This is just giving you a basic overview of what ESG CV dollars are intended for. These dollars are for our homeless community, people struggling in homelessness or experiencing homelessness. And there's generally 5 different buckets you can place these dollars within to help serve these community members. You can help them through outreach, where people, where we pay the salaries of service providers to go out into the streets, into the community, to find people who are actually unhoused and living on the streets, and work with them to find solutions for them to get them into housing. We can pay for emergency shelter, which will allow people, so that's paying for the operational costs of emergency shelters in our community. Rapid rehousing is paying for caseworkers and service providers, and also for, in some cases, rent, to help people move quickly from shelter into a permanent living situation that works for them. Permanent supportive housing allows people to stay in, it's more long-term support through this programming. It's very expensive, but it can help people who really don't find success in any of these other programs. Then homeless prevention helps people who may be at risk of homelessness. In addition to these buckets, these dollars also have to address COVID specifically. So preventing, preparing for, or responding to COVID. So it has become clear to us over the past couple months, and in particular a couple weeks, that there's been an increasing need for winter shelter. We have estimates from our community partners that we are lacking 40 shelter beds. This number was arrived at by looking at our current emergency shelters, the regulations they have in place based on COVID that kind of limits their numbers down. And also some national dollars that estimate that we'll have additional people coming into the homeless service shelters this winter. So we are looking at a need for an additional 40 shelter beds. We would like to also be aware of other needs like new shelter beds in general for the longer term, past winter shelter, but also additional units for crisis housing. So opening these dollars up, making them available to the community will just allow us to start that process of figuring out how to use these dollars to meet this need that we've found. So that's the sort of foundational information that I just wanted to lay out there, and then open the floor for questions.
Yes, Suzanne, I do. The 809,000, is that in addition to the 503?
That's a good question. We've already contracted the first 503. That was the first amendment we did. I think it was back in the summer and spring of this past year. So this would just be for the $809,000.
Okay. Can we unshare your screen so I can?
Sorry.
That's okay. There they are. Are there any other questions from the committee?
I have a question, Councilor Craig.
Fire away.
From the first round, who were some of the community partners that received funding? And are we looking to fund the same partners, or what's the process going to look like for these new funds? You're muted.
That's a great question. I'm pulling up that slide actually, so I can give you specifically who we funded. So the first round, we partnered with the county who also received these similar dollars. And specifically the city funded an three emergency shelter funds. We funded Lancaster County Drop-In Center, low barrier overnight shelter, and a quarantine hotel. We also funded Tabor's an outreach worker through Tabor and an outreach worker through the food hub. And we also funded some rapid rehousing. We're hoping to follow a similar process as the first round, in which we, with the county, release a joint RFP to all service providers, describing what these dollars can be used for and asking a series of questions, hoping that they can respond and ask in detail the need that they see and the need that they can address. One thing that we were able to do in the first round is partner also with Councilor Arroyo, who served on the RFP committee and was able to lend his expertise to making that decision. And that was a really wonderful part of that process.
I really appreciate it. This is just a comment, but in our kind of process of partnering with the county on this RFP, is there any way that we can advocate for kind of some safeguards for inclusivity and kind of equity within that? Just because housing and just kind of homelessness and the way that it works and the resources that are available in our community, particularly around Water Street Mission, isn't the most necessarily inclusive space. So if there's any ways that we can kind of advocate to the county in this joint effort to kind of make sure that the services that are being provided with these dollars are equitable, that would be really great.
Definitely noted. And Chris, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but we can definitely work to put a question related to equity, inclusivity on RFP. I also say that with another RFP that we released for our regular ESG dollars, we did include a question around that. I think a couple questions around that.
Great. I really appreciate it, Susanna.
It's definitely important.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. That's a great answer. I don't really have much to add other than to say I wanted to emphasize the partnership that we had with the County Redevelopment Authority, who administers the funds, the CDBG and the ESG funds for the county. And I think that working with them on improving the selection process and then bringing Councilor Arroyo in and having other representatives as part of that team to make good decisions, it's improving the way that we look at these applications. So I absolutely think we can emphasize the inclusivity point that you made.
Appreciate it.
If I could just follow on, it's my understanding that the federal funding also includes safeguards related to discrimination as part of the utilization of these funds. Is that such that that makes the Water Street Rescue Mission ineligible for receiving these dollars? I feel like
yes, that's totally
I understood
correct.
that because there were specific questions that were being raised related to transgender individuals and serving that the community broadly as it related to gender equity. And so I feel like we did some homework on that and realized that the federal guidance precluded some of these dollars from flowing to organizations whose mission does not encompass communities, LGBTQ communities, as well as folks who are transgender.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, Councilor Craig. In regards to some of the homeless that are in Binns Park, has there any been the money that was prior to used for them because of COVID-19 and them being in such of closivity, I guess, in that particular area, trying to stay warm? You still have the ability to migrate and infect each other and continue spreading the virus.
Yeah, that's a good question regarding how the first round affected the homeless in Binns Park. We believe that hiring new outreach workers made particular gains in that area and in trying to reach out to those people. And then also putting together a day center, a low barrier day center, low barrier overnight center was also a strategy to try and address the situation in Binns Park earlier this year.
And moving forward, would they be making sure that those that do live in Binns Park are going to be part of or put in the list for the COVID-19 vaccines that have been rolled out? I'm sure this first round, they may not have enough, but the second round that will be coming out, that they are included in that, because it's very important that they particularly are at risk compared to others.
Yeah, Councilor Diaz, it's a great question. In fact, the executive leadership team was talking about that earlier today. And I think, like a lot of officials, we're waiting for additional guidance from the state. But at this point, we're using the Center for Disease Control, their directives in terms of how to categorize the various people in the community in terms of which order they will receive vaccines. So, Mayor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at this point, it's only been members of healthcare, those who work directly in healthcare, who have received the vaccine so far.
Yes, those that are employed by healthcare providers that have received the vaccine, as well as beginning on Saturday, emergency EMTs throughout the county, including 23 of our firefighters.
I can, if I may, I can provide some context here. But because we, the employer that you, Councilor Diaz, and I, and Councilor Soto share because the Lancaster County Homelessness Coalition is underneath the umbrella of LGH. LGH is aware of the need to vaccinate both our outreach workers and our shelter population and our sort of sleeping rough, unhoused population as well. And so will be, that should be folded into their schedule of how folks related to the health system will be vaccinated. And as new, well, I hope nobody new comes into that situation. But if new folks come into the situation, part of our ongoing partnership with both the health system and LEMSA and an upcoming community paramedic project should seek to ensure that anybody that we are not already aware of should be able to be vaccinated in the future. But as you know, we don't know yet when vaccines will become available for that population.
Thank you, President Wydell. Councilor Diaz, are there any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Council President, thank you for tying that all together and bringing us back full circle to the emergency solution plan. And are there any other questions pertaining to that in particular? I'm so sorry, my puppy's barking. So, questions from the public. We'll give it a minute. I'm gonna put my thing on mute. I'll be right back. I did not hear any questions from the public. Okay, so motion that we move this to full council on the 12th. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Second. The last item that I have on the agenda is amending the noise control ordinance.
Yes, Ms. Craig, I can handle that one. I think this will be relatively quick unless you have any questions for me, or even if you have any questions for me. This is a straightforward amendment to the Noise Control Board ordinance. As you may know, the Noise Control Board currently approves any decisions on variances to recurring issues. So if there are noise variances that happen on a regular basis, such as holiday fireworks, that's something that they hear and usually provide a variance for. In the past, it has been the police bureau that has been the decision maker on one-time noise variances. So a good example of that would be an outdoor concert, or if there's an event at a particular restaurant. That has been an administrative burden for the police bureau in the past. So we made an internal decision to move that responsibility, that administrative responsibility, under the zoning administrator, Jamil Thrash. We floated this idea to the Noise Control Board just recently, and they supported this administrative change. So the police will continue being the enforcer of the noise ordinance, but the administration of this one-time variance will go under Jamil, our zoning officer. So that is really the nature of the amendment that is before you today, and I can answer any questions if you have any, and if I can't answer them, then I'm sure Mr. Smith can as well, because I think he touched base with Jamil earlier today.
Thank you, Chris. I don't have any questions. Are there any questions from the committee?
If I may, Councilor Craig.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry, Chris, just to clarify.
Yes.
So nothing as far as details is actually changing in the actual ordinance. It's just who's kind of supporting this or housing the ordinance?
My understanding is it's procedural in nature, so there's not a content change in terms of the criteria. Douglas, is that correct?
Well, I'll just add one other detail. There actually is a new section being added to the ordinance that essentially says if someone that's been granted a variance should receive a complaint from neighbors that they are to lower the volume. And that does, I think, allow some flexibility in the enforcement of these issues. That is really the only new language that's being added. And just to be thorough about this, there is language saying that a decision must be rendered within 45 days at the suggestion of our solicitor that has been removed. So that altogether, those are the three changes that are being made to the ordinance, but really with the most substantive being the administrative part of it.
Got it. Thank you.
Douglas, the component related to the lowering of the volume, is that just a change related to the police enforcement? It is either a yay or nay. It's giving them more flexibility to provide guidance to someone who might be violating the ordinance. Is that the intent?
It really is establishing some a condition for all variances and special variances. So special variances are those one-time variances that you mentioned, Chris, for non-reoccurring events. And the exact language is, should any neighbors complain of excessive noise, a City of Lancaster police officer will be dispatched to investigate the same, and upon confirmation request that the noise level be lowered. Non-compliance may result in termination of the affair or event by the officer or denial of any future variance.
And I think that in addition to the administrative burden, one of the key pieces of this was we found ourselves in the situation where police were approving these noise variances and then also responding to complaints. And so we wanted to separate that a bit by having Jamil on the zoning hearing board be reviewing because he's also looking at use and the different properties and whatnot, especially for routine ongoing variances. Like, for example, in a normal year, Marion Street Court has outdoor music every Friday night. That's a variance that's provided to them on an ongoing basis. That's different than the one-time events, but having the police bureau both approving those as well as enforcing neighborhood complaints and things like that related to noise was something that we just wanted to avoid.
Are there any other questions from the committee? No? We'll give the public an opportunity. I don't think there's any questions from the public. Motion to move this to full council on the 12th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Here you go. Council President, that is all I have on the agenda. And my puppy is sitting beside me now. Those are the perks of working at home. So sorry.
No, we appreciate the break, Councillor Craig. Thank you very much to Councillor Craig, to the Community Planning Committee. Next, we have Councillor Soto chairing the Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Council President. At this time, I would like to open the Public Works Committee, which will involve Councillor Soto, Councillor Arroyo, and Councillor Diaz. We have 2 items on the agenda. First item is Bill number 3, 2021, approving the PennVest funding for Public Works water projects. The second item on that would be resolution number 4, 2021, appointing Cindy McCormick as city engineer. We'll start with bill number 3, the PennVest loan. And who will be speaking to that? Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, I think Mr. Campbell and I are going to tag team. Amber, if you can, yep, there he comes.
Hello, hello.
Good evening, Mr. Campbell.
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much, council members, for having me on for this presentation. So this is something we had informed you about a few meetings ago, that we were going forward with this Penvest loan. The amount is in, did you already do a reading of the,
No, we have not.
okay, so should I go forward and read it, or?
Oh, yes, please, if you care.
Sure. This is an ordinance increasing the indebtedness to the city of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, by the issue of a guaranteed water revenue note, the maximum principal amount of $10,550,000 for construction of various structures and facilities to improve the city's water system, fixing the form, dates, interest, and maturity thereof, making a covenant for the payment of the debt service on the note, providing for the filing of the required documentation with the Department of Community and Economic Development to incur and exclude additional debt of the government unit, providing for the appointment of a sinking fund depository for the note, providing for the authorized signatories and authorizing execution, sale, and delivery thereof. So that's a long-winded way of describing that we are going to Penvest for $10.55 million for key infrastructure, very, very necessary infrastructure for the water system. One is the replacement of the Millersville Pike transmission line, and another is for new emergency power generators, which are required and mandated to be completed by, I believe, late summer or early fall of this current year. We were very fortunate in receiving bids that were significantly lower than the 10.55 we were asking for. So in the aggregate, inclusive of additional engineering fees, inspections and permits, and administrative and legal costs, the bids came in so that the total nut we're looking at is about $7.1 million. It's literally $3.4 million less than we were anticipating. I think this is in part for several different reasons. One, we are now, as we had described in previous meetings, more aggressively working with Penn Bid, so that it requires that there is significantly more competition, which really creates a much more competitive situation for bidding of these kinds of projects, the magnitude of these kinds of projects. Secondly, we have updated and are much tighter with our procurement and solicitation documents, so that it is much clearer upfront what we're asking for, how we're asking for it. And third, and not least, we are generally requiring mandatory pre-proposal conferences, so that those who are proposing are aware of the kinds of circumstances they're likely to encounter. So
Go ahead.
Please, Mayor.
I just want to say this is like another success story of Penn Bid, and I really want to give props to Barry Handwerger, who has just done a huge effort to overhaul our internal bidding processes and to require staff to bid even things that we didn't normally think we needed to bid. And we are saving, in this case, I think this is our biggest win yet, yes, millions of dollars. And so I just, I think between the changes that, and this is also to give kudos to Steve and the Department of Public Works as it relates to planning, and all of the pre-work that went into the bid documents, and then at this juncture using Penn Bid. So just really excited about this, and that it's been a no-brainer. So I appreciate, Steve, that we're going to be able to get a little bit more, squeeze a little bit more juice out of this Penvest loan.
Absolutely, and I think these recent developments are boding well for the fact that we have a lot of infrastructure that we're going to have to do over the ensuing months and years. So this is a great thing. It can be repeated, and I'm very much looking forward to being able to get a lot of good infrastructure done. So Patrick will probably describe a little bit better some of the financial aspects of this. But in large part, even though the PennVest loan request was 10.55, it will remain that number until we have actually finished the work. And then they will reconcile the number that we actually have to pay. So we're not going to be paying for 10.5 million when we only need 7.1. But that the number doesn't get determined until after the work is completed, so that you're working with the actual numbers. Patrick, is there anything else that you'd like to be able to add to?
Well, I'll just let me pull up the info here that I have up on the screen. And before I jump into this, though, I just want to give you a sort of a sense of the when Steve is talking about more competition for these projects. We had a total of 10 bidders for the Millersville Pike main project. We would normally have like maybe 3 or 4, and they'd all be ones that we've worked with before. I mean, adding additional competition, and some of these are, you know, they're definitely coming to these projects through PennBid and because of PennBid and because of a lot of the work that Barry and also staff in Steve's department and folks in Treasury who handle the procurement process or the bidding process. Just getting the competition and also having these pre-bid conferences where all of anybody who wants to be a successful bidder has to attend the conference. And that means that they know also who else is going to be bidding or likely bidding on the project. So it definitely adds an additional sort of layer of competition in this process that, as Steve said, has definitely turned out to our benefit. So in terms of the funding itself, you heard Steve say about what the number is, $10,550,000 in the ordinance. And I'm not sure if you've seen a recirculated ordinance. There's going to be one very slight modification where adding the term not to exceed in the first whereas clause of the ordinance. So what you're authorizing in the ordinance is a total principal amount not to exceed $10,550,000. As Steve said, the actual number is going to be significantly lower than that. This is actually part of the reason why PennBid requires us to have actual bids in hand before going through the rest of the financing process. You know, for those lucky times when you get significantly under. So the terms of the loan itself, up to 276 months or 23 years. We have up to 3 years of interest-only payments during the construction phase of the project, and both of these projects have different construction phases. Steve said the emergency generators are required to be, I believe, installed and up and running or available basically by the end of August. So that was a very tight timetable. And then the Millersville Pike Main project is really running into 2022, I believe, because it's sort of related to the South Tank project that is also along Millersville Pike and is underway right now. And then those up to 3 years of interest only is followed by 20 years of principal repayment. And the interest rates, this is really why we go after these PennVest loans. You know, the interest rates that we can get here are definitely below market, even though bond rates have been low. We get a 1% rate for the first 5 years, and then after that, a fixed rate of 1.743%. So really, really favorable terms. I've said this before with PennVest, a lot of other hoops to jump through to go through PennVest approval process, but when you get interest rates like this, it's those extra hoops are sometimes and often worth it.
And we're getting good at jumping through those hoops.
We're getting much better at jumping through those hoops.
Patrick, as far as the Millersville project and the tank and the generators, they fall on the tank falls under a different loan. Am I correct? A funding resource?
Yes. So the South Tank project itself is funded through the 2018 bond issue. We have 9 point something or other $1 million project in there. That is solely for the construction. The design had been done previous to that.
Thank you, Patrick. That's the only question I have. Are there any other questions from the rest of the committee?
Nope.
Thank you, Patrick. Could you remove that, please?
Sure. Yep. Sorry about that.
Councilor Diaz, Councilor Arroyo, do you have any any questions? Faith? No.
I do not
I'm
have
sorry.
any questions. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
are there
One other.
I'm sorry.
Councilor Soto. The one other thing I just wanted to add is there will, assuming this closes on the schedule that we have set up, we will have interest payments during 2021 that we didn't originally include in the 2021 budget. And at the same time, we also have that refinancing that I talked about during the budget process. So there's going to be more than a wash. I mean, the savings that we're going to achieve through that refinancing will be significantly more than the interest only payments that we would have during 2021. And then we would include, then we'll have a known debt repayment schedule for this Penvest loan at that time when we're creating the 2022 budget.
Okay. Are there any other questions from City Council?
Councilor Soto, I just have one question.
Yes,
and
Councilor.
Patrick, you just answered my other one. But just to clarify, we talked a lot through the budget process about how infrastructure improvements and doing these projects were kind of laying the groundwork to make sure that we could have PUC rate cases in the future. Is this one of those projects that you had been mentioning?
It will, certainly the generator project will definitely, because the PUC requirement is that infrastructure be used and useful. So it has to be not in the planning process, not in the construction process, but actually in the ground and useful by the end of what they call a fully projected future test year. A term that Steve is going to come to know and love. That is, and that timing depends on when the filing is actually made. So depending on when, we know that the generator project will be able to be included in the next rate case. It depends on the timing of the completion of the Millersville Pike Main, whether or not that can be included in the rate base for that next rate case. Right.
Thank you.
It'll still be beneficial to us, Patrick.
Well, yeah, it's as I understand it from the engineers, I mean, the Millersville Pike Main needs to happen because the South Tank project will create that need.
It's absolutely necessary infrastructure, part of an infrastructure stretch that we will be focusing on over the next 3 or 4 years.
Councilors, if I could add, the revised version of the bill that Mr. Hopkins mentioned is the one that I had sent to you by email shortly before the start of this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Bernie.
Bless you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from council on bill number 3? Do we have any questions from the public? I'll give it a minute or two just in case. It is a big loan.
K9 questions, maybe?
That'll work. Okay, hearing nothing from the public, I make a motion that we move bill number 3, 2021 to our next meeting on the 12th of this month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, let's
Thank
move
you.
on to resolution number 4, appointing Cindy McCormick as city engineer. Mr. Hopkins, I guess that's you, or is that Mr. Campbell as well?
That's me as well. So the resolution reads, it's very, very brief. A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving the appointment of the city engineer. appointment of the city engineer is something that is generally required and has requires that the person who is serving in that capacity and has been serving in that capacity since 2016 be actually officially placed in that position. I want to be able to say that Cindy McCormick, as our city engineer, has been serving us tremendously well. Many of you have known her and have worked with her on a variety of different projects. She has a tremendous breadth of experience. She has been a registered engineer since 1995, and we, the city of Lancaster, benefit from her vast experience in several different private firms throughout Pennsylvania, as well as working with PennDOT and working with several other municipalities. The responsibility of the city engineer is to manage transportation and park and capital improvement projects, the bike plan, traffic calming, traffic signal improvements and operations, and safety projects. She reviews land development projects for compliance with city ordinances and public works standards and specifications. She coordinates planning and policy efforts related to the right-of-way, such as active transportation plan, Vision Zero, which you'll always hear me say is the crown jewel of the plan of the city of Lancaster, pedestrian and safety education and enforcement, right-of-way permitting, GIS, which is our data management for our mapping and data management systems, and responsible for coordinating the DPW capital plan. Many of the initiatives that I've described are ones that she has brought before you in the past, most notably the bike plan and Vision Zero, the public right-of-way. She is spearheading the process for the South Duke Street redevelopment, the Christian Street development, and a variety of others. She is also at the forefront of our neighborhood engagement, how we make sure that our capital projects in the public right-of-way reach out to each community and engages the community in the decision-making process for this. We are tremendously honored and blessed to have someone with her stature. She speaks regionally and nationally about a number of subjects that are important to the city of Lancaster, as well as to the profession in general. And I highly recommend her to the post that she has been serving so well at for the last several years.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Patrick, you have anything else to add?
Not a thing.
Okay. At this time, I wholeheartedly make a motion to move resolution number 4, 2021
Second.
To full council on the 12th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That concludes the Public Works Committee meeting for this evening. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilor Soto. We move then to the Public Safety Committee. Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Mr. President. So today we have two items on our agenda. We have number 1, 2021, which is amending the city's fire prevention code. And then we have resolution number 1, 2021, which is recognizing and commending healthcare workers. So we can start with bill number 1, 2021, which is amending the city's fire prevention code. And I believe that Chief Little has been very patiently waiting for us. So if we could add him in, that'd be great. Hey there, Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So tonight we're going to talk about the up for adoption is going to be the amending chapter 142 of the Fire Prevention Code to incorporate the 2015 International Fire Code standards, which would be replacing the previously adopted 2009 International Fire Code. So currently we're working off of some of our work we currently do is based off of the 2015 code, which aligns with what our building code officials are using. What's unique and why people may talk about 2009, the state actually first has to adopt it before we then adopt it. So we're a little bit behind Pennsylvania did adopt the 2015 International Fire Code standards. The 2018 code is out there, but the state has not adopted it. The city of Philadelphia is the only one that currently is under the 2018 code. So tonight I'm just bringing for you our recommendation within the Fire Bureau that we do the adoption of the 2015 International Fire Code, which would align again with our building code officials and what their work is, because we are out there in the new properties and also any building that's under a remodel or construction. That's what we're using. So this would be really just a replacement of using the words 2009 and making it 2015.
Thanks, Chief. So are there any major differences between the two?
There's
codes?
not. We went through with the solicitor. We went through the appendix chapters A through M. Everything stayed the same.
Okay.
There's going to be some minor modifications throughout the code when you're talking about the fire marshals that go out and do the inspections. Certain things under construction may have changed a little bit, but then that also goes under the building code official and their presentation out of the building code 2015 standard. So again, we just work side by side with our building and codes every day, our fire marshals. So this is just aligning with them and everybody's on the same page.
Perfect. And then have you had a chance to look at 2018? Are we anticipating that when we do adopt 2018s, is there going to be major changes in that?
The 2021 is coming out in a few months.
Great.
But again, that's the state most likely is going to end up adopting 2018, even though the new 2021 will be out. So we're always a cycle behind.
Got it.
And that's just the way the state operates with adoption of building codes and the fire code.
Fair. Does anyone from the committee have a question? No, pretty straightforward.
Nothing, no questions.
Do you have any questions, DJ, or anyone else from the public? No. Okay, great. Well, if we don't have any questions, I'd like to make a motion to move bill number 1 to the January 12th full council meeting.
Second.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Ayes have it. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Have a good day. So moving on, we have resolution number 1, 2021, which recognizes the contributions, sacrifices, and hard work of healthcare workers in our community, which honestly, we cannot give them enough credit for all the hard work that they're doing. And I believe, Mr. President, that you brought this one forward.
I did. Thank you, Councilor Garcia Molina. It is, as Councilor Garcia Molina said, it's fairly straightforward. I just wanted to take some time and hopefully as a council recognize the contributions of the nurses, CNAs, medical assistants, cardiac recorders, logistical and maintenance employees, et cetera, that make the health systems in our community function. And that does include, I'll take a moment to tip my hat to the 2 members of council that includes. There's really no way that we can imagine having seen our way through this particularly challenging 9 months in our community and what's going to come forward without the employees of our health systems, who are quite literally on the front lines battling a pandemic. And I'll take a moment, and maybe this is just for DJ's benefit, but maybe there's somebody watching on YouTube, to just recall early on when healthcare workers across the country, when we really did not know what was going on, and healthcare workers across the country were doing their best to save lives and keep people safe and comfortable, not necessarily with the proper equipment, not necessarily knowing what would keep them safe or what was coming next. And that's really that kind of dedication to our community is the most that we can ask of any of our residents. And so as the vaccine starts to roll out and maybe hopefully we see a distant light at the end of the tunnel, I thought it appropriate for this body to recognize the contribution of those workers. End of pitch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think if anything, this is the least that we can do as a body to value the work that they are doing, that many of us I don't have the luxury to do. I think I've been very privileged that I've been able to work from home, and I recognize that as a privilege, while many others are on the front lines taking care of our community, and I'm very grateful for them. So I'd like to make a motion for resolution number 1, 2021 to move to full council on January 12th.
I second that wholeheartedly.
I appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And that wraps up the meeting for public safety, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia Molina. That brings us to the clerk's report. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. So some of the things I've done in the last month, of course, I've sent this to you in writing already, but just to encapsulate some of those things, I've been closing the books on 2020, literally and figuratively. I've created files and put those electronic and paper files into order. We do a rather thick book every year with the agendas, minutes, resolutions, and original copies of the ordinances. And that goes off to a binder and it goes onto a shelf. And I'm compiling that right now. And I will also be doing setting up the framework for that for 2021. As part of that, I also was coordinating with staff for the meeting schedules for the coming year. I've also sent you the meeting schedule for council for 2021. And I was coordinating for the Human Relations Commission in order to get their meetings published also. Research, and on behalf of the Public Works staff, I researched a railroad right of way and attended a parking authority meeting, and I wrote the healthcare resolution that you just reviewed.
Thank you as always, Mr. Harris. I do this every couple of meetings, but at the top of the year is a nice reminder that none of us would be able to do what we do without our city clerk, Mr. Harris, and he deserves all the good things in the world. So here's to you. That being the end of the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
President.
Great, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. One down, y'all.
God bless everyone and be safe out there. And I encourage everybody, if you haven't had your shots yet, please try to get them as soon as possible.
And wear a mask.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah.
God bless everyone. Bye-bye.